I've been privileged to know a lot of quite remarkable people over the course of my life. Some super famous and well known for what they've done, others obscure from the societal perspective, but every bit as incredible. And one of the more remarkable people I've encountered was a guy named Valentin Turchin, who I got to know in the late 1990s when I was living in New York City area, and he'd been in New York a while. He, however, had originated in Russia, in the Soviet Union, and he was essentially the founder, or one of the key founders of Russian AI. And I mean, Russia was one of the few places that was doing AI way back into the 1960s, right? You had US, Russia, Japan, France, UK, Germany, not much anywhere else. And in the 60s, Val was developing a lot of quite modern and sophisticated AI ideas. I mean, it wasn't called AI exactly in Russian then. I guess there was a lot of talk about cybernetics and biocybernetics, right? It was about complex control systems and automated control, self-control, self-modifying systems, and it was about the same complex self-organizing dynamics being there in human beings, in analog circuitry, in digital machines. So Val had thought a lot about the cosmic future of AI, and he wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Science. It was published in Russia, something like late 60s, early 70s, and came out in English a little bit later, which was in the same spirit as a book like The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil, or my own books, The Path to Posthumanity, or The Consciousness Explosion, or the Prometheus Project by Gerald Feinberg, which is a book by a Princeton physicist published in 68, I encountered in the early 70s, which was my first glimpse of what we would now call singularitarianism. So Val wrote The Phenomenon of Science, which brought this view to the Russian scientific community in a really crisp way. Like, we're going to build thinking machines, we're going to cure aging and death, we're going to build nanomachines, and this will bring us closer and closer to understanding of the mysteries of the universe, although he wasn't sure would ever truly resolve all the mysteries of the universe. There was a spiritual core of a eternal mystery, the secret that he liked to talk about. But Val was not just a philosopher. I mean, he innovated a whole lot of advanced AI technologies. He developed a language called Refal, which is sort of like the Lisp of Russia, Lisp being an advanced AI programming language that came about in the US in the 60s. Refal was developed around the same time frame. Really, it was more modern and better than Lisp in many ways, and he was developing what would now look like some fairly modern AI reasoning algorithms using Refal. He also didn't draw such a strict boundary between advanced computer science and AI, and he developed, for example, a concept called Supercompilation, which that's about taking source code, program code, and using AI and heuristic tools to rewrite that source code in a form that will do the same thing, but do it way, way faster, right? And he pioneered this in the refal language in Russia. Now, when I met him in the late 90s, he was working with some colleagues, Andrei and Arkady Klimov, whom I still know. They're based in Moscow. Brothers, super geniuses also, right? And they were working on super compiling Java, and I got into that a bit on the technical level. It was some pretty hairy code written in the ML language with code comments all in Russian, but I mean it would take Java code, and we were in Java 1.0 and then upgrade to 1.1, right? You take Java code and rewrite it so as to be vastly faster. So I remember, like, for math code, like say the fast Fourier transform in Java, we got like 50 to 70 times speed up just by rewriting the code automatically using their supercompiler. Now there were issues. Java is not as nice a language as refal in many ways, and it didn't do much good at optimizing slowdowns that were due to memory management or due to multi-threading, and it turned out that quite a lot of the slowdowns in Java in that era were due to memory management or multi-threading, right? So we still had some work to do to make it a really super useful commercial product, although it could have been used and probably could still be used to take like Java math libraries or signal processing libraries or something and massively speed them up. One of the more memorable business presentations I gave was, I don't think Val was there, but his colleague Yuri Mostovoy may have been there with me, who was helping on the business side. And we presented the Java supercompiler to the Java program optimization group at IBM in their campus in New York City, and we actually gave like a real demonstration of the code supercompiling Java, and this was a whole room full of Java experts at IBM, and you know, they saw it and they just didn't believe us. They were like, no, we are not seeing what you are showing us. I mean, they didn't out and out accuse me of fraud and of making it up, but they just organically rejected the innovation they were observing because it was like, 20 years ahead of what they were doing in IBM's Java optimization team at that time. They were working on small little optimizations, and this would just take a whole Java code, rewrite the whole thing into an utterly different form. It would really have a lot more lines of code and be a lot uglier to the human mind, but much, much more efficient. That was instructive to me. I was kind of new to the ways of business at that point. If I were doing that sort of thing now, I would do it differently. Like I would find someone in IBM, sell them on it privately, then get them to present it to IBM as if it was their own idea, right? But I mean, now I'm 59 years old. I've dealt with a lot of human, psychological, and organizational mechanics, right? Back in that time, I was like, 35, the age my oldest son is now, and I didn't know how this sort of thing worked. I thought you go to a great company like IBM, show them a great thing that would make a lot of their code run a lot better, serve their customers a lot better, revolutionary technology, then they would go for it and they would invest and so on. I did help Val and the Klimovs and Yuri get, I guess, $1 million, might have been $2 million in seed investment into their company, Supercompilers LLC, which was a much deserved investment, but in the end, wasn't enough to get them to a full-on commercial product. And then, tragically, during the early aughts, a few years after that, Val got Parkinson's disease, or Parkinson's, and he was less and less able to move, right? He was writing a beautiful paper on the cybernetic philosophy of mathematics, and I remember him just struggling to move his finger little by little to type. Like at one point he could walk, but he couldn't get started. Like I had to give him a little push to get him going, and then he couldn't talk, but his wife could somehow read exactly what he was thinking from little gestures on his mouth, and she would know exactly what he was saying. That's his son, Peter Churchin, is now a quite innovative historian, pioneering the use of quantitative methods to study history, and his book End Times I would recommend. And I've been doing some work recently on using AI and statistics to predict political violence, which is heavily inspired by Peter Churchin's work. But let's not get into that. The reason I'm reminiscing about the amazing Valentin Turchin is I've just returned to Seattle from a brief trip to St. Petersburg, to Russia, a country I'd never been to at the time I knew Val, where I was talking to some of my younger research colleagues there about precisely supercompilation. So I've been working with a number of brilliant Russian AGI researchers and software developers for a number of years now. I mean, there was long discussions and conceptual collaborations, and then more intensive work together since, I guess, 2018. And it's been very, very interesting to see the different way of thinking and different sort of education and lineage that the Russian team brings to the AI field, and the sort of stuff that Val and the Klimovs were doing in the late 90s when I knew them is sort of second nature to Russian computer scientists in the AI field, just because of the nature of education that they've had, I guess. Because in the 60s and 70s, the computers the Russians had were even worse than the computers we had in the West, and that was true until quite recently. Because of that, while Western AI has focused largely on making faster and faster chips, and then making better libraries to leverage those chips, which has been amazing. Like, you see what's happened with NVIDIA and matrix multiplication routines and deep neural nets, right? It's not been bad, but Russia took a different direction. Their hardware wasn't as strong, so they focused a lot on doing sophisticated math to allow software to make better use of the hardware they had, and supercompilation was one example of that. And I think this is still in the intellectual DNA of the Russian community in various ways. Like, there's a lot of mathematical understanding and a sort of automatic reflex to form and understand mathematical models of software systems, and we see that all over the place. So in working on our ASI chain layer 1 blockchain that's now in DevNet, and we're hoping to fully release it toward the end of the year. I mean, many of the core ideas there came from my friend Greg Meredith, who lives actually just a few miles from where I am right now in West Seattle. But many blockchain developers we work with had a very hard time understanding what the hell Greg's team was doing with the ASI chain, which is with the Rolang language and the row calculus mathematical framework and a bunch of category theory models. I mean, most American blockchain developers have trouble even with Cardano and its use of Haskell, which is like preschool level compared to what Greg and I have been doing with ASI chain. But, you know, the Russian blockchain guys I was working with, you know, they read the math papers from Greg's team and they connect that to the code. They start making tests and debugging the code. Like the mentality of thinking in terms of abstract mathematical models and using them to formally optimize quite complex software processes for practical effect. Like this is it's utterly in their cultural DNA, in the same sense that like playing amazing soccer is in the Brazilian cultural DNA. And I mean, not that Brazil doesn't have amazing mathematics too, actually. I mean, one of the best math universities I've ever seen is in Rio de Janeiro. But I mean, Russia has had this sort of fusion of math, computer science, and AI deeply in their culture for a long time, and you can see this in the way of thinking of many of the developers there, even now. So, yeah, this was an interesting trip to St. Petersburg. Incredibly beautiful city. I mean, June is the best time to go there. You can just sit outside in a cafe looking at the beautiful old buildings and sit outside, sipping wine, discussing AI algorithms and philosophy till 2 or 3 a.m. if you want to. It doesn't get really dark this time of year because it's so far north. I mean, I've been there a number of times with my wife and kids. My kids have a bunch of friends there now. This time, I just went myself. It was computer science oriented, not tourism. And, you know, I was a little worried because of the geopolitical situation. I mean, it's not hard to fly to Russia now on a practical level. You have to bring cash like in the old days because Western credit cards don't work there because of sanctions. So I mean, all the Russians can go in and just buy a coffee by face recognition. And, you know, in many ways it's more advanced than the systems you see most places in the U.S. But as a foreigner, you've got to use cash because the financial systems are no longer integrated. But not a big deal. And I've been to Russia for some AI discussions a couple other times since the war started. It was always like eerily normal there, except for the lack of people from U.S. and Western Europe, right? Like you see Chinese there, Central Asians, Africans, but you don't hear a lot of English spoken. This time, it was a great trip, and I wasn't in any danger at any point. It didn't feel that way, but indeed, after I got off the plane, got my eSIM working, then there's an SMS, like an hour later, the Russian government has shut down all roaming services. I'm like, well, this fucking sucks. Like my phone doesn't work without roaming service. What can I do? I mean, there's Wi-Fi places, but the Wi-Fi internet has various Western services blocked, like WhatsApp and Telegram, whereas if you're on roaming internet, things are more likely to work without a bunch of hassling around. And it was all right. I've traveled all over the world, including before mobile phones existed, right? But I was a bit ticked off. On the other hand, then, within 12 hours or so, they turned it back on, and then I realized what had been the cause of the mobile phone outage, and I started feeling guilty for being such a spoiled motherfucker, right? Like, so what had happened is there had been Ukrainian drone strikes on Kotlin Island, out in the water not far from St. Petersburg, and one of our AI team members had been able to see it from his house. I mean, he wasn't in danger. He lived, 5 or 6 miles away from the site. But that's why the government shut off the roaming service, I guess, out of some hope of stopping the drones from causing more damage. I mean, it's complicated. Some drones use Starlink. They all use different kinds of messaging. I mean, in the end, I believe no one was killed by that particular strike, and I think what they said is 4 people were injured, some property was damaged, but then phones went back on, everything was normal. I had some great meetings with my AI colleagues there. I gave a couple talks as well at a side event of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, which was going on at the time. And the Economic Forum itself is it's sort of politics oriented, and didn't seem like the time to get into that. So the side event I spoke at was organized by a bank. It was technology and business oriented. It was very international minded business people, university people, technology people, and as well as the technical meetings with my team. It was pretty interesting to get a sense of the mentality of the local business world. I mean, I was talking about AGI, of course, and open and decentralized AI to be done by everyone in the world for the good of everyone in the world. And totally, people there every bit as psyched about AGI, every bit as aware of AGI, every bit as worried about AGI as in the Silicon Valley or Beijing or right here in Seattle or Kigali or Nairobi or Addis Ababa for that matter. I mean, awareness of AGI is now wonderfully global. I would say I didn't get the feeling anyone I talked to was going to be doing like a big AGI investment within Russia in the near future. It seemed like the mentality was a bit more short-term, maybe even more so than before the war. Like when there's a lot of uncertainty around, people just focus on like, what can we do right now? Because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Quite a lot of people also talking to me about sort of mindfulness and the psychological game and the need to just be grateful for what you have and enjoy life and the process now, even if there are things you may not be a fan of going on. And I thought for a moment about this book, McMindfulness, that I read not long ago, which is arguing that mindfulness as a practice is in some ways can be bad, like it works against social change. If people are just focusing on being happy in their own mind no matter what, then they're not going to try to change their life circumstances for the better. It's just like religion is the opiate of the people, as Marx said, right? Maybe mindfulness is now being promoted as the opiate of the people by the corporate establishment. Like, don't try to overhaul your industry. Don't try to change your job. Don't try to fix your government. Just let yourself out so you don't give a shit no matter what, right?